Hi, and welcome to this week's edition of Found Friday, airing again on Blab. Once the show is over, I'll be posting it on our SoundCloud account so you can listen to it as a podcast. I'll also be putting it on our YouTube account so you can share it and play it. I'm Karen.
And I'm Erin.
And we're both from Gins Metrics. And this week, we're going to be talking about using content marketing to get more qualified leads. Historically, the goal of content marketing has been to generate more website visitors, more time on page, and more likes on social media. Why aren't those necessarily the goals that will impact the corporate bottom line?
I mean, the world needs more content. Like, I need another hole in my head. It's pretty obvious to most people that driving a lot of traffic that's the wrong traffic isn't going to drive a lot of conversions. Ironically, that realization hasn't really slowed down requests for content that do just that. It's like there's a disconnect between knowing that you need people to convert and not recognizing how the content you're creating has an impact on that request. So some nonsense that I heard back in my agency days, from a client was, well, we're currently converting for this microsite content at, 1.5%. So for every 1,000 people we bring in, we're converting, like 10 people or so. So what we need you to do is drive 1 million people to the microsite so we can meet our goal for conversions. No, what you actually need to do is increase your conversion rate so we don't have to find 1 million people who fit this really niche product that you have. And let's spend our time and money making the actual site more relevant. Delivering things that the market actually needs and making the experience seamless, as opposed to continuing this current crap that's up there that's driving a bunch of people who just happen to accidentally kind of convert now and then. So I always think it's interesting, when somebody says, well, currently for every X number of site visitors or every X number of people that see this thing, this number of people end up purchasing or converting or taking this action. So the way to get to what we want is to just increase traffic. Like, you do understand that at some point this is diminishing returns, right? Because at some point you will run out of people to drive there. So the real idea is like figure out how to amp up the conversion rate and understand how your content kind of plays together to really make that happen, as opposed to just like sheer volume.
Well, I feel like sometimes people look at what their competitors are doing and saying, oh, they're beating us on the search engine. They're ranking higher because they're putting out a blog every day and we're only putting out 2 blogs a week, and they have a slideshow every other day. So the way to beat them is to do lots more content. We are going to beat them at the quantity level. I think that's what do you think about it?
When you get this idea that quantity is the way to win something, obviously you're not really necessarily understanding the ecosystem and what your business, like how your business operates, right? So just because somebody's creating more content than you doesn't mean they're actually moving any more product than you, creating any more conversions than you, et cetera. So you'd kind of want to understand and know that before you spend a lot of time and money trying to create duplicate content out there for people without even knowing how people are really engaging with it, right? And people may even be highly engaged, but they still may not be the right people. So I always hate to drop this so early in the episode, but like this is a lot of what you can solve with medium, method, and message, right? You need to know how what you're saying is impacting people, where you're saying it, and that impact, and how all of these things work together to really build an experience that delivers on what users want. So I'll add another M to this mix, right? Which is market. So essentially, the market refers to the people that you're talking to specifically. In a lot of cases, this is kind of personas. So when you're setting up goals, you need to take into account what the overall organizational goals are, how your department contributes to that, and for your specific role, if you're not the head of the department, what you're doing to help meet these goals and objectives. So for most people, revenue is a goal, and that means some kind of conversion is necessary. And if you're watching the show, then chances are you've got some kind of online presence. And so, your website, and if that's the case, a lot of times I tell people to take stock of what you're already doing across the organization. Do you have a website, microsites, a bunch of social channels, content you've been posting other places, blog posts, videos, whatever you've got? Where does all this live? Do you know how everything is actually performing right now at the medium, method, and message level? Do you know how often these things are managed and updated? Do you know how individual pieces of content on each of these different things is performing? Do you understand why certain content performs better on certain channels than on others? Do you know how different markets or different audiences actually consume content differently on each of these different channels? So before bothering to set up a lot of arbitrary quantities as your goal, you should probably know what's working now, how it works, and why. Because essentially, if we go back to that kind of example of well, what I really need you to do is drive 1 million people to this microsite so that we can meet our goals. If you met your goal, if I drove 5,000 people to the site, does it matter how many people came as long as you met the end conversion goal or the end revenue goal? It really doesn't.
Right. And that's really where maybe a content audit at this point comes in, right? To really figure out, okay, what are we already doing that works? What isn't working, but maybe we can do something to it. We can freshen that up to make it work. And what, do we need to move away from? And then
it's interesting you bring up the content audit situation, because I think where we get into this thing where people don't actually do a real content audit, there's a couple reasons, I think. One, people do a content audit because they may have done one in the past and it didn't really yield anything, or nobody used the output of it, and they felt like they spent a lot of money and didn't really get anything for it, right? And that's really tragic. The second reason is that stopping other things to do an audit isn't a very sexy thing to do in an organization, because it's if you tell somebody you're going to do this big content audit, the idea is you're going to stop doing things that people feel move the ball forward, to take time out to look at the past. And then the idea is everybody's well, what now? So what you have to do if you're thinking about doing this content audit is understand and explain that what the content audit will yield is specific actions and specific insights that you can use moving forward to make everything work better. And you need to be able to show some kind of plan, or you need to work with an organization that can show you that plan and help you make sense of that. Because, otherwise it does fall flat, right? It's like anything else that provides you insights and recommendations. It's, hey, we went back, we looked at this, we got all this information. And then there's this report, there's all these numbers. People are like, ooh, numbers, charts, graphs. And then they don't do anything with it. And you're like, fantastic. I'm really glad we did this.
That was exciting. Well, what are some ways that marketers can make sure they're attracting the right audience? You talked about making sure it's the right audience, not just a whole group of people, but the right people, and not just more audiences.
Yeah, so when we talked about personas a few weeks ago, what I wanted to drive home is that you want to be able to slice and dice and measure and understand behavior for more than just things like men versus women, or this income group versus that income group. You need to understand what matters to them and how their perception of the content is affected by that. This goes back to the you are not your audience comment, and not necessarily grouping people in a way that seems immediately important to you. But rather collecting all of this data around how people are actually arriving at your content, consuming it, and converting on it, and then finding common threads from those methods. You might find connective tissue between the type of product, the geography, social media involvement, and specific keywords. All can kind of be grouped together to understand kind of a specific persona. When you can understand who converts at both kind of a user level alongside grouped data around things like keywords and content exploration and other parts of their journey, you can start to really dissect things and get in there and create these groups where you can figure out a better path. You can figure out what you really need to be creating. Once you get to know these people that are converting, you can try to find more people that look like them in smarter ways. You can also figure out who's coming to the site and not converting and what similarities those people have, because then that allows you to dig into why they're not converting. And then you can figure out if you can make changes that would actually ultimately help them convert, or if you need to stop trying to attract a certain type of person based on the fact that they're probably really not a good fit and are never going to convert despite their traffic and frequency of being on your site.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem with that is that people don't want to let go of all those page views. They're like, well, if we stop marketing to these people, we're going to reduce the numbers.
Because when you think about it, wouldn't you be like, yeah, I got 10 million people onto this site, but like only 3 of them converted. Like, if anything, you want your conversion rate goes down when you attract a bunch of people who don't do anything. So, I mean, like, mathematically, I mean, screw the traffic, right?
That's right. Yeah. Unfortunately, I think that's sometimes what maybe the C-suite or something is looking at, or people are used to looking at. So when they see the amount of traffic go down, they immediately think that's a fail, instead of, well, maybe we're just narrowing.
Well, if somebody in the C-suite really only cares about traffic, they probably shouldn't be in the C-suite, to be honest with you. Because really having somebody who comes to your site regularly and never buys anything doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but it can be really problematic for your organization. What you don't want to do is expend a lot of resources on somebody who's never going to be a buyer. And I know that there's a certain amount of like, well, people have to try and do some considering before they become a buyer. So I'm certainly not saying that if somebody doesn't come and buy something in the first, like, or book conversion or whatever, in the first 10 seconds, like, you should just be like, screw you. But people in like car sales and department stores and things really understand this. It's like, you have to think about it. Somebody that has a Honda budget is never going to buy a Ferrari off your lot, right? So having your salesperson ignore like potential qualified customers to let somebody who's really only going to buy a Honda test drive a Ferrari for a while is not a good idea. So there's like some reasons that I really think this is nuts. So if you're spending your time not focused on somebody who's your real audience member, you're not able to understand who your real customer is, or you don't care. And if you can't tell the difference from your Honda people and your Ferrari people, if you own a Ferrari dealership, you probably want to look into that. This goes back to persona development and really understanding your market. Spending time with the wrong customer is not spending time with the right customer or figuring out how to attract the right customer, which is what ultimately makes you money anyway. Spending time with the wrong customers also gives you feedback and data input that you don't need and don't want to mix in. For instance, you don't necessarily want to mix in somebody who's looking for like a minivan or a family sedan's wants and needs and features from a luxury performance vehicle if what you sell is Ferraris. The feature input and commentary that you're going to get from the minivan person is way different. You don't want to try to make a Ferrari a minivan. So like, why do you really want to like spend a lot of time interacting with these folks? And it's not to say that there's anything wrong with either one of these situations. It's just like, you really need to know what you're selling and who you're selling it to.
I agree. We have a comment from David. Hi, David. Thanks for joining us today about buyer personas. But can you just expand on that a little bit for me, David? I'm not exactly sure what you're saying, that buyer personas are greater than the goal. I don't know. Erin, can you sort of?
I think maybe what he's saying is like that buyer personas kind of get you toward the goal. Yeah, I mean, so David's totally right. So he's saying knowing your target audiences and how they relate to your goals for each persona. That's exactly the point, right? Is all of these personas and groups and things that you can slice and dice need to help you understand how each of their paths get to the goal and how each of these people's things is different, because that's how you're going to create content that actually resonates with them. And how you're going to actually ensure that each of these groups is most optimally set up to do those things and converts at their highest possible rate, right? And this can be different for each persona group. Not every group will have the same conversion rate. Obviously, you can look at this as an aggregate as well, but these are oftentimes really different things.
And then David also says it then also enables your testing and metrics for each persona and how each one is converting.
Yeah, David and I are totally on the same page, I think, in terms of...
Yeah.
Yep.
Content grouping. David, you get the Ginza Metrics love because we are so into keyword and content grouping. You're going to have to go back and look at some of our old Found Fridays.
And keyword grouping thing I think is funny because I think a lot of times when people are looking at persona groups, they don't look at keyword groups and content groups that match those personas, which is crazy to me because what you're trying to do with a persona group is understand how those groups want to be spoken to, not how you want to speak to them, how they natively look for things and talk about things differently than other persona groups. And a lot of that is understanding at the keyword level and at the content level, how they're describing, talking about things, looking for things, sharing things, interacting with things on their own, so that you can most clearly and effectively mirror that natural behavior instead of trying to force them into the behavior you think they should have.
Right. So, well, that's actually the end of our blab today. David, I'm really glad that you joined us, and I'm going to be putting this on YouTube and SoundCloud. You can also replay it on Blab. Yeah, but join us next time too. I love the comments. You can also, anyone can email us, Karen@ginzametrics.com or Aaron@ginzametrics.com, and we'll be back next week with
All right,
another
bye
topic.
everyone.
Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.